Hi, photographers. So I'm going to show you today how to make a animal hybrid on Pixlr. So here's my example. I used a photograph of my dog Millie and a photograph I found online of a pig to substitute the pig nose for her nose. I often like to call her a little pig because she snorts sometimes. Um, and she kind of has a squished face. So I figure pig's pretty fitting. So I'm going to show you how to blend two photos together using Pixlr. So first, I want you to take photos if you can, if you have a pet at home. It's always best to take your own photos, but if you can't, I'm going to show you a quick and easy way to find a high quality image on Google search. So I'm opening up my web browser here and going to google.ca. I'm going to start with the animal that I'm searching for. And I'm going to go to images and tools. Under here, I have the option for size. I can choose size and large. This will just give you a little bit of a better selection of range for your pixel and resolution size, so that you're not getting such tiny pixelated images. So here's the photo that I used for my nose. So I'm going to open that image up in a second web browser, right click, save image as, save it somewhere. So here I have it saved as pig in my downloads folder. So I'll hit save and jump back over to Pixlr. So the first step you have in creating your image is to open your first image. So I saved my image of my dog to my desktop. There she is. Choose full HD. And then you're going to open up in a new layer. If you see where my mouse is hovering over here, see if I can make that focus. I'm going to open up a new layer on the layers panel, and I'm going to choose image. And there I'm going to go to my downloads folder and find the image of the pig. Okay, so you can see that the resolution of the pig image is quite a bit smaller, and the image size is quite a bit smaller than the image of my dog. Being that you're getting it from online, that's going to happen. That's also why it's best to try and take photos yourself if you can. All right, so I'm going to first stretch this image of the pig out so that it overlaps with the image of my dog. And when I'm happy with my selection, I can hit enter or click off into the background to accept my resizing. I go back up to the top layer of the pig and click the three dots. And I can start by using the transparency function to reduce the transparency of the pig so that I can start to see my dog underneath. Now, the reason you might do this is to start by lining up your image on top of the other. So I'm going to try to clone and mask out the ears for this pig so that I can see pig ears on my dog. Might be a little bit harder than the nose, but we'll see how it goes. So once I'm happy with the thing there, I can start to rotate the image by grabbing that top toggle. I'm going to start with this left ear, and I'm going to try to align it as best I can with my dog's ear. I might have to make it a bit bigger. Okay. And some of the time it won't be perfect. That's okay, because different animals will have different sizes and shapes of different features. So there I go. I'm pretty close. And I'm going to enter to accept on my keyboard. Now I'm going to go back to the three dots in the layers panel next to the pig layer, and I'm going to bring that transparency all the way back up to 100. Okay, so my first task is to mask out the remaining areas of the pig layer so that I'm only seeing the ear. And that way I can see my dog's face underneath. So I'm going to go to Pixlr's mask function, which is the little scissor icon on the left of the toolbar. And I'm going to try first with the magic cutout option. Magic cutout is doing a decent job of the background. If I get to a point where it's taking out too much of the image, or I start to see the ear losing its place, then I can just do Control Z or Edit Undo to remove. Okay. I also have the option of using the draw cutout function. So I'm going to choose that paintbrush, and when I paint over, it's going to add that to my mask. I'm going to increase the size a little bit so I can go through this a bit faster. So increasing the size of my brush, I'm going to get some of the background there that wasn't snatched up in the first one through. I'm just going to start with one ear at a time. And I might do a second layer with the pig for the right ear, just to keep things simple. Oh, went too far. That's okay. I can come back in, bring that back into the mask. Okay, so I've removed the face of the pig and the background of the pig. If I went too far, I can switch to add to cutout. I'm going to make that brush size a lot smaller to bring back in that bottom part of the ear. Paint it back in there. Okay, now you can see that there is part of the background image of the pig showing on top. So I'm going to have to zoom in quite a bit closer. I'm going to take my magnifying glass, zoom into that area of the pig. Now you can see the outline of those little hairs on the pig's ear are a little bit more apparent now. So go back to my mask, remove from cutout, take that brush if I want really small. I'm going to reduce the softness a little bit so I can get a little bit more fine-tuned. Now you can really go fine-tuned if you want, painting those out. That's going to take me quite a long time, and I only have 10 minutes on this video limit, so we're just going to increase the size just a bit and go a bit faster. Okay. Okay, so I might recommend going this close, as close as you can, if you're trying to detect the edge of a feature. But for the purpose of the video, we're just going to go a little bit faster, so it might not be a perfect selection. You'll have to imagine, or maybe I'll do a fast forward function. Maybe I'll learn one of these days how to record and then fast forward my work, speed it up a little bit. Just gonna add a bit more. Okay, whoops, move too much there. All right, so you can see when I'm this close, all of the little bumps and edges of my selection. Hang on. Oh yeah, I made a mistake. That was my dog's hair, not the pig's hair. So if you picked animals which are close in color or texture, which I definitely did because it makes the whole process just a little bit easier on you, you may get confused, like I just did there when you're masking. What am I masking out? Is that my pig image, or is that my dog? Just how close Millie looks to a pig. Just a little bit of a piggy. Okay, here we go. All right, so now you can see in the background, my dog's ear is peeking out on this side of the pig's ear. Same over here. So what I want to do is try and use the clone stamp tool, which is over here, to sample the pixels of one layer and paint those pixels onto the other. Now, in Photoshop, you have a lot more flexibility with the clone stamp tool than you do on the Pixlr application, but we're going to try our best to use this clone stamp tool in a similar fashion. So when I select the clone stamp tool, the source option is highlighted first. So wherever these crosshairs, wherever I click, so if I click on this ear and then I increase my brush size, it's going to sample directly from where those crosshairs were selected. I can paint in an entire second ear. Okay, so you can start to make some creepy little things. Now, the reason that jumped away and hid is because if you remember from the first part of the video, I've already masked out the right side of the pig's face. So even though I cloned it, it's now underneath the mask. So I would have to go back to the scissors and choose remove from cutout and add to cutout. The whole function of Pixlr is just a little bit different, so it takes a little bit to get used to. So now I've revealed that part of the mask where I cloned the second ear. So this can get a bit confusing, and if you're trying to use the clone stamp tool and you're not seeing your work showing up, it's likely that it's hidden underneath the mask. So remember, the mask is shown with the little scissor icon here in Pixlr, and the way I found a workaround for that, because we can't simply edit our mask quite as easy, is to either duplicate the layer altogether and continue your cloning separately, or to reveal a little bit more of the mask on the sides where you're going to go. So you know how I just went in really, really closely to eliminate that background from the pig layer and add that to my mask? I can now bring that back in if I choose to clone the colors of the pig ear so that they match the colors of my dog's ear, and so that my dog's ear lines up with my pig's ear. All right, there we go. Okay, so we're back to point A. I might have lost you there. If you got confused, send me a message. I'll try to clarify again further. So now I'm going to come back to my clone stamp tool and I'm going to zoom in using the magnifying glass because the hotkey for Control Plus doesn't seem to work on Pixlr. I'm going to select the clone stamp tool and make my brush size smaller again, about 80. And I'm going to keep it pretty soft, about 50%. The softness is just kind of the feathering around the edge of your selection. So I want the edges to be soft for now. I might firm those up later. Okay, so now I'm going to come back to here and I want to select this part of the ear to clone below. So where my crosshairs are, now if I start to paint, it's going to imitate that color, that portion of the ear. It's going to bring it back in. And then as I get to the end, there it has detected and painted back in the edge of the ear. So I'm going to have to source it again. So I click source, select my crosshairs, and paint it back in. Okay. Now, starting to look a little less realistic. And why is that, you might ask? Well, I have a hard edge painted on the mask, right? So I can fix that up after too. Okay, coming back to the mask and paint. I keep getting confused, but I'm gonna remove from cutout, make that brush a little bit softer, back to 50. And I'm gonna try to pull that back in. There we go. Okay. All right, so there's the clone stamp tool. It's not as sophisticated as it is in Photoshop by any means, but we're doing what we can here. So I'm going to show you that again on the top part of the ear. I'm going to take my clone and select here. The trick usually with cloning is the more you sample, the more realistic it will appear. So the more I source these pixels and the closer I can get to them, because you can detect if you go in really, really close, you can see all these different variations of pink in that pig's ear. And I want that to look as close as possible. So if I go back and source over here, and then I try to paint in those pixels there, then I might even getting some of that texture, okay, which is a little bit more realistic. This little hand is how we move up. I have source here and paint in that edge of the ear. And then if you get some confusing shadows, just keep sourcing or making your brush smaller and going nice and slow. Take your time with it. It's a finessed process, and usually I can work a lot faster with this, but like I said, I'm learning a new tool along with you. I normally don't use Pixlr. I would definitely prefer Photoshop, but here we are. We're learning from home. We're making the best of it. All right, so I'm gonna continue with this edge, and you notice I'm only gonna move over that much, paint it in. Once I get to that edge, I'm gonna stop, undo, try that again. Don't go that far, because I don't want to imitate the inside of the ear. Okay, it's gonna source again there, and pull that up, oh, and stop, undo. There we go. And source, paint. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video and continue a little bit of this work. Okay, so now I have finished cloning the sides of my pig's ear to extend so that they line up with the edge of my dog's ear. You can see like a little bit of variation in here between the darker pink and the lighter pink. So I recommend always zooming out of your image a few times before you move on from this step, because when you're that close, it can be pretty tricky to see those minor details in coloration. And we want to get it as close as possible. We want to get it as realistic as possible. Obviously, it's not realistic that these dogs would be on, or these ears would be on this dog, but we're trying to make it believable, right? Believable and like entertaining. So the less believability, the more viewers are just going to be like, oh, well, that's photoshopped and it's photoshopped badly. We want to Photoshop it well, okay? So when I zoom back out, that texture is a bit better. I could go back in later and finesse this area here. I also would try to gently erase some of the edges of my mask where it blends in to my dog. So instead of masking, which I would normally be able to mask in Photoshop with a gradual reduction in my opacity of the brush, so that it gently fades. I can't do that as fine-tuned in Pixlr. So instead, what I'm going to do is, and I would never recommend this in Photoshop again, I'm going to take my eraser and I can adjust the opacity of my eraser tool. So if I am at a very, very soft edge on my brush and my brush is fairly big, I can kind of dot around the area. And I'm going to first attempt it with 70%, but I'm going to dot around this edge here. And it's given a bit of lag. It means my video is getting too long. And now I've just kind of blended in that edge. So it's not quite as dramatic when it's jumping from the blonde fur to the pink fur. I'm also getting a bit more of a realistic texture blend there, just because it's not going with those harsh kind of floating edges. Okay, and I wouldn't recommend doing this around the edges here because I have that sharp background, but you can always paint in some of those little furs if you're going to be really fine-tuned with it, or if you have a tablet at home to make that appear more realistic. So I'm going to pause the video there, and I will share with you guys the finished product where I've cloned the second ear on my dog. I know this tutorial might have been a little bit harder to follow, so let me know if there's anything you need more clarification on in the comment section of Google Classroom or on our Flipgrid. I hope everyone's staying safe and staying home, and I hope we all get to see one another in the classroom soon.